people, I think, come down and they look at what you're doing, and then they go away, and pretty soon they kind of like say, well, he's a friend of mine, and then pretty soon they say, well, I did it before he did.
Yeah.
I'm Daniel, and this is my family team from Secure Supplies. We have preserved and rebuilt green technologies actively around the world now for over 18 years. The water fueling and gas phase change technologies are changing the way your world's power and gas industries work. Helping you access these technologies is our life mission. Click the subscribe button now to join our technology releases and updates every Monday. And consider buying a ticket to the show by pressing the link in the description. If you would like to see the secrets ahead of time, head over to our Patreon tech training releases every Friday.
Yeah, well, that's...
But the significance of stamp stuff was really incredible at the time because you've asked some questions and other people ask questions, and they keep going back to this electrolysis, and did you put any of these material into his device, and to make it a regular electrolysis process? And of course the answer to that is no. Stan never put anything in his device other than tap water.
So you're referring to any kind of making an electrolyte solution?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that the electrolyte solution limits the voltage level to 2 volts a cell. And you look at Stan's apparatus, it's each tube is a cell by itself. So how in the world could you expect to get a high output conversion factor of the cell? And so when we were looking at it, we uncovered and looked at, and it takes about 13 volts, theoretically 13, but it takes about 11 volts to actually pull that electron out of that hydrogen. And so all of these other systems using electrolyte never allow the voltage to get up high.
It takes 13 volts per tube, per cell, per...
No, the thing is, it takes, theoretically calculated it was 13, but practically it only takes 11 volts to pull the electron out of a hydrogen. That's all it did. So people that talk about real high voltage systems and things of that nature, people that talk about electrolysis, they're below. Chemistry is all about heat, and it's either hot or it's cold, but chemistry only works between 1 volt and 10 volts. That's where they work. And so when we started working with our system, we realized, well, if it takes 11 volts to pull out an electron, why don't we build something that can use 11 volts to pull it out? So that started us off. That's
interesting. I've never, in all the reading that I've done, in conversations I've had with people, I've never heard mention of 11 volts as being significant. I've generally heard people talking more about the number of thousands of cycles per second to achieve resonance.
Well, your frequency now, that's a whole different. That's the whole different ball game. When you design your device, you have to design your device. It's a whole, it's not one part. It's the whole system.
In other words,
has to be designed.
Just part of the.
It's just part of the equation.
Yeah, part of the equation.
It's not. You have to look at waveguide theory. We started off. We took a bunch of tubes and we cut them off at a certain height. There's a reason for that, because if you look at waveguide theory, you know that you have a frequency. It's like an antenna. Marconi was credited with developing the radio, and when Marconi told people that he could transmit a long distance, and people say, "You are absolutely crazy," and they put him in a nut house. They put him in a nut house.
Really?
3 years. They said
I didn't know it.
Yeah, and then some of his benefactors got together and said, let's see what we can do. So they went up and they got him out. And they said, can you do what you really said you could do? And he said, yeah, I can do it. And so they set up a ship. They put a ship out in a harbor, put him on land, and he came up with his 2 devices. He made 2 devices that matched each other, and one was on the land and the other one was on the boat. And then what they did was they fixed that boat in a position that nobody could pass information to that boat. Nobody. And in those days, they used semaphores, they used flags, and they used light. So they did it during the day, and so they couldn't use light. And then they made sure there was no flags there, so they couldn't use semaphore. And so he took his device and he clicked it, so to speak, and it created an electrical arc. And then in turn, the electrical arc showed up on the boat, and then they were able to set up a code, and it worked. And they were just incredible. They just could not believe it that he could transmit that distance. Well, what was Marconi's? How could he do it? Well, he found out that the atmosphere has 50 ohms impedance, and so when he designed his antenna so it would match the impedance. The signal would go down that wire, and it was matched to 50 ohms and 70 ohms, and it went into the air and it transmitted. And if you don't match the impedance, you get a reflective wave. The wave energy that's reflected back is like 90% of what you're trying to push out, so it doesn't work. So the antennas today have a vis wire of 1.1 to 1. That means that, yes, you have a little bit of loss, but the impedance match allows that signal to go into the air, and that's what Marconi's secret was. You know, every person that's contributed to our improvement on our planet has found something that makes it work, and people don't understand it at the time it happens. You know, it's like Christopher Columbus in 1942. I'd read the history, and they say, well, he discovered America. And I said, well, there was a lot of people that came before him that knew what the Americas was. What was his thing? Well, Columbus, what he did was he started talking to a lot of the people, the Navy guys and the people on the boats, and he said, what is it that, why do you go here and not there? And he started to see and sense that the wind would blow easterly or the wind would blow westerly, and so he would travel down into Africa on the coast, on the west coast, and he found out, he says, holy smokes, the wind is blowing towards the east, and if I go back up into England and stuff, the wind is, well, the wind's going east up north, and then it's going west down south. So what he found out was that it was the trade winds that he could go out and come back. And if you get in a rowboat and you're going to row yourself out into the ocean, you better make sure you can get back, because if the current is flowing on the outward bound, you couldn't row it back to get back. So he realized it was the trade winds, and that's what he should be noted for, not the fact that he did show up in 1942, but that was his secret.
And you do mean 1492.
1492, yeah, I'm clear.
Yeah, well, that's very, very good analogy. In other words, this thing can be done, but it has to be done intelligently. And
exactly.
That's what caused Marconi and Columbus to do what they did. They were looking at the problem from a fresh viewpoint that others were not. And even though in Marconi's case they attributed his idea to insanity, we all know as we drive to work and listen to the radio that we're better off for his having had that vision of what would be a successful radio.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The transmission of intelligence through the air, you know. And so this device, what we're talking about with this water system is to look at it today in the different eyes. People, you mentioned last time we were on the air, he says, well, you know, McAllister, I think it was, you know, says, I'd be glad to look at something, but I never see anything more than 100%. And he's absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with what he said. However, if you study Richard Feynman, you find out that, let's see, Kirchhoff is a good example, where Kirchhoff says if you take a point and you understand all the energy coming into that point, you can understand all the energy that leaves that point. And he made this point by, if you take 2 amps of current in each wire and bring it to a point, that will sum, and you have 4 amps going out of that point. And that's the point, is that some people only look at one leg, and they look at the 2 amps coming into that point, but they're not looking at the other point, the other energy input to the system. So they make snap judgments, and that's unfortunate because it's very limited, and it's very, a guy that really knows what's going on listens to that kind of stuff, and he says, I'd rather be over eating a sandwich and having a glass of milk and listen to that guy,
Yeah.
Merch updates are ready. If you want to look good in the H2 hot rodding scene, and if you would like to pick up some hydrogen hot rodding merch, now is your chance. Please head over to our hydrogen hot rod shop. The link is in the description. Thanks. Alternatively, you can send me an email or join me on WhatsApp chat. The details are in the description. Let me know which things you like and what sizes you want. Network of home builders is growing very fast. Whether it's a roadster, supercar, or a yacht build, or maybe even an industrial power gas energy project. I'm here to assist and guide you. Please head over to the Consult with Dan link in the description, book a discussion for 10 to 30 minutes, and I will save you decades of study.